Okay, my name's Bridget Thorne. I helped as a temp work with Dominion software in testing and preparing the election equipment for the November election. And I also am a precinct manager in North Fulton County. My primary job was printing test ballots. The test ballots, we had to print 21 for every precinct, and some precincts have multiple ballots within them. So for every ballot, we had to print 21 test ballots since there were 21 candidates in the Senate race. So we printed these test ballots, and then they're run through the scanners and tabulators to make sure that you could vote for every candidate that is running in the election. I also helped set up precincts as, running the actual test, labeling the equipment and sealing the equipment. But my primary job was creating test ballots. There's 255 precincts, I believe. And so most precincts have probably 8 to 30 BMDs. A BMD is a ballot marking device. So it's the actual large jumbo size iPad that you mark your votes on. We were testing in the Georgia World Congress Center, and Dominion personnel was heading up all the setting up of the equipment and the testing. So when you had a test ballot, the first ballot, you would go and vote for the first candidate in every single race. So your first ballot, you would go all the way through the whole ballot. And then on the second ballot, you vote for the second candidate and the no's and the questions that they ask at the end of the ballot. So you go all the way through, et cetera, until you've done the final candidate, which is a write-in. Some precincts were 4, I think 5 precincts, and so you would have to do 21 times 5, so you'd have 100 and some ballots that you would have to run through the scanner to test. But we use the normal paper that you would use in every precinct, and we use the printers, we use the equipment, so the test ballots were the same as a real ballot. There was no difference. So we started making mistakes. We'd often make mistakes when we printed ballots on the official paper, and they're indistinguishable from real ballots. So then we would also print a whole precinct of ballots, and they would lose them, so we'd have to reprint them again, but then they'd probably show back up again. There was just a suitcase underneath the table that we were supposed to put the ballots in, and eventually that suitcase was supposed to go to a shredder at some time. But I don't think it was emptied every night, and it wasn't secured. So I decided, we can't just put these in a shredder in the little suitcase under the table where anybody had access. We need to spoil them, because as a manager, if I have an extra ballot, I have to spoil it, and I have to put it in a folder, and it has to be counted, and I have to explain why I spoiled a ballot in my reports at the end of the night. So for me, I was uncomfortable about just putting them in the shredder suitcase without spoiling them. So then I went through one day and pulled out the 8-inch stack of ballots, and I spoiled them. I probably spoiled 3,000 or 4,000 ballots. There were probably hundreds or thousands of ballots that didn't get spoiled. I believe that there were ballots after that day that were misplaced, and we had to reprint them. And I assume those ballots were put in to be shredded, but I never went back through to spoil those ballots. Okay, so after the early voting concluded at State Farm Arena, they brought over all the tabulators / scanners to the temporary warehouse, which was in the Georgia World Congress Center, just across the street in Building B. And I mean, to me, it seemed like there was 50 scanners, and every scanner was filled with thousands of ballots. And so you're in a warehouse with test ballots and real ballots in the same room. And the treatment was basically people were just opening them up and emptying them into suitcases. It was just anybody who wants to come can come and help empty out ballots and put it in suitcases. And I didn't see a process. I didn't see somebody over there with a form recording, this suitcase belongs to this scanner. I don't think the memory cards were still in the scanner. I hope not. But it was just disheartening to see the ballots just randomly pulled out of scanners by, employees that most of them were temporary employees. Whereas a manager, touching a real ballot is a big deal, and you need to have two people. We all take an oath. There's kind of a procedure when you empty a suitcase of ballots. So I had several technicians that were out in the warehouse that observed this, and they came and got me because they were uncomfortable. So then I went to go take a look to see what was actually happening, and I was quickly reprimanded by a Dominion employee, I believe. She was a Dominion employee, not a Fulton warehouse employee, that they've been doing this all week and that there was nothing wrong with it. And for me, it didn't seem right, but I thought, oh, well, these ballots, they're just backups anyway. The memory card is the real thing. So, it's going to be okay in the long run. But then the recount comes along and they're counting the paper ballots. So I guess it kind of became a big deal. Then later that day, employees that were setting up precincts found ballots on the floor, and they brought them to me, and they're like, Bridget, is this a real ballot or is this a test ballot? And I look at them and I had no idea. I didn't know if they were real or test. And I sadly had to tell them I didn't know. And so we simply just boiled the ballot and put it in the shredder bin. So when I left the end of that night, I believe I left around 10 p.m., I walked around a row of cabinets and I saw a scanner sitting there with a chair next to it and a suitcase on the floor and ballots in the suitcase. And my thought was, oh, somebody abandoned the ballots that were in that scanner tabulator and just left it there on the floor. And I just kept walking. There wasn't anything I could do, or at that point it was 10 o'clock at night. I was ready to go home, so I just simply left the scanner and the ballots unattended. Because I've been working 9 years and I just want the process to be true. I want everybody's vote to be secure. I want everybody's vote to count. I want it to be fair. And, it's just disheartening to watch after, 9 years that it seems that things have gotten worse and not better.